All right, so we're going to talk about some margins and adjusting those. Now, margins is something that you've probably heard of, and it's still not always 100% clear sometimes. So I want to show you some helpful ways that you can adjust your margins, especially if you're printing or if you need a specific layout, for example, for our business style letter here. So what we're going to do is across the top, we're going to go to the View ribbon. So we have all these options across the top. It's toward the end. We have View. And this allows us to view our page a specific way. Now, there's a lot of different options here. We're going to go to the one that says One Page, which is right here under Zoom. And when I click that, you're going to notice that it zooms out really far. And on my screen, that's pretty hard to read. So this is great just for visualizing how it's going to look when it's finished, not necessarily for typing. Okay, on the left-hand side here, the gray, so you'll see there's some gray here. If I kind of move my mouse level across, that's where that margin starts. So that gray area would be white space on our paper. Now, it's pretty tempting to just come here and move these. It's not recommended. It's probably going to be a lot easier if we do it through the layout option. The reason being is this is not an exact science. I mean, I can kind of move things a little bit, but it doesn't always move it correctly. It causes some issues. It is just, it's poor practice. I'm going to show you a much easier way to do this. So across the top, we're going to go to the layout ribbon. This layout ribbon has a lot of great stuff in here. They even have some preset margins. And we're going to see a whole bunch of these. So they have normal, which is what we're on right now. That's a 1-inch margin all the way around. There's narrow. This is a 1/2 inch. We have moderate, wide, Office 2003 default, mirrored. There's a lot of great options. But we're going to actually do a custom margin. So if you go down here where it says custom margins at the very bottom, this is going to open up a nice little dialog box for us. And we're actually going to go to the top box right here. And we're going to change this one. We can highlight this whole thing, even our little quotation mark. And we're going to put 2.5. We can just click anywhere in here, empty space. And that will give us our 2.5 inch margin across the top. You don't need to type that inch mark. It knows what you're trying to ask for. And then we're going to leave everything else alone, and we're just going to hit OK. It moved it down for us, so that 2.5 inch margin is pretty typical of our business style letter here. If you are most professional settings will be okay with the 1 inch, but you may want to use a particular custom margin setting for all of your documents so they are consistent. Okay, now I can't read this. This is a little hard to read, so I'm going to go back to View. I can zoom in a little bit. I can do 100%. I prefer, actually, in the bottom right, you notice I have this nice little line right here, right in the middle. If I click there, it's going to bring me right back to where I can see it a lot easier. I actually use this quite a bit more. I can drag, so hold on to it with my mouse, drag in, drag out. I like to keep it about there. That gives me actually about the size of the paper I need. So that is how you are going to adjust the margins. Now, it's all fine and dandy. We did our view, but we want to see how this is actually going to print. So we can actually view what this is going to look like if we go to our Backstage view. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Print. All right, and this gives us a nice view of this is kind of what our letter is going to look like. We can see our spacing. We can see all of this great information. It looks really good. And in here, we're going to be able to select our printer. I have a default printer, as you can see, but there's also a bunch of other printers I have as well. So depending on where you're printing from, or if you're printing at home or a business office, finding the correct printer is definitely very important. You can also adjust if you want to print the whole thing if you want to print one-sided or two-sided. There's a lot of great options in here that we'll get into a little bit later. But this is something that would be very helpful. Let's say if you had a letter that was much longer than this and you needed it to be printed on both sides, you would just switch to printable sides. So this is not going to affect us because we can see we only have one piece of paper that we are printing. So that is how you would see that. Now, if you're not ready to print, we have this nice little arrow right here. We can go back and then go straight back to our view of our document to continue making any edits that we need to do. So that's it for our letter. Super nice and easy. But how do you send a letter? You need an envelope. And Word can actually help us with that as well. So we're going to go ahead and save this guide just because that's what we like to do. And we're going to move on to the envelope. All right, so to make an envelope, what we're going to do is we actually need a new document to start with. So we're going to go to File, to our Backstage view, and we're just going to select a blank document. Doesn't need to be anything fancy. We're just going to select a nice blank document here. And we are going to then go to the very top, and we're going to go to the Mailing tab. Now, this gives us a lot of great mailing things. These are used with some mail merging. This gets a little more in depth, but we're just interested in envelopes. If I click envelopes, it's going to ask for our delivery address. That is going to be in your book. And you can find that right here. It'll say in the delivery address, it gives you the address you need to type. Again, just for sake of your time, we're not going to sit here and watch me type. I have this preloaded. And just a little reminder, this does not have spell check in it. So just be very aware of that and extra careful with your typing. Now, normally if you had a return address, you would type that here. However, in this example, they do have business envelopes, which is pretty typical. It has a return address already printed on that. Some companies have a stamp. So all we're going to do is just click omit. Okay. At this point, you could actually print it if you wanted. You could just click the print button and it'll print it straight off. But what we're going to do is just click Add to Document because we're going to print this at a later time. David's actually going to print this for us. So click Add to Document. Look how cool that is. This is where your spell check would come into play, but isn't that super neat? This would print off onto an envelope if you have a printer that prints envelopes. Most printers will. You actually just need to adjust the tray and insert your envelopes, and that would print an envelope for you. All right, so that looks really good. So we're actually going to save this. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, because we have never saved this before. And we're going to save it wherever you want to save it. I am actually going to save this in my business folder that I save everything in. Again, I highly recommend creating a folder that has your information in it, so that way it's easy for you to find. And we're going to save this something very specific. Now you can get rid of the whole thing. You don't have to keep that .docx because it's going to add that on for us, as we can tell right here. So we can just get rid of all of this. And we're going to save this as something very specific. We're going to save it as, let's see if I can find what we're saving this as. All right, we're going to save this as NP_WD_1_envelope. Okay. And then we're just going to hit save. Now, it does have a second page here. This is not needed. You can actually click, if you click down here, you can click backspace. It's still going to stay there. So just be aware of that. If you are printing, it may try to print that second page. So that's where you would go to File. We talked about this with printing. You can print the whole thing, or you would just print the first page. So that's where we would just print this page right here. All right, so kind of cool, kind of a fun option is adding an envelope. This is something helpful even if you're personally working at home and you wanted to have a really nice looking envelope. Makes it a little easier, saves your hands from writing so much. Kind of a nice little tidbit to be aware of. All right, so now we're actually going to move on to a visual part of this, which is adding a picture. So take a break, double check over your work for the last few videos, and we're going to move on to this next part.